What's going on, everybody? Welcome to After Prison Show, and today I want to share with you guys two crazy prison-related news stories, both pertaining to the use of fingerprints. In one story, fingerprints are going to be what ends up nabbing a guy who actually escaped from prison, and the other story involving the use of fingerprints being what would lead to a guy being set free after decades of his life had already been spent behind bars. And folks, something to keep in mind all the while as I share these stories with you guys, if you think about the use of fingerprints either being used to catch a guy or free a guy, that's probably something they would use a lot more commonly back in the day. Because these days, they've got DNA evidence. And as I share these stories with you guys, ask yourself how it was the fingerprints and not DNA evidence in either of these two stories that would lead to the conclusion. So it's with all of that being mentioned that what do you say we go ahead and dive head first into this video. Whatever that little move was right there, do not ask me. I have no idea. That was a little skiing with a little swimming. I don't even know. That was probably horrible. Folks, this first story that I want to share with you, this is about as insane as it possibly gets. This story took place back in 1995 and involves a man who escaped from prison. Now, usually when you think about somebody who's going to escape from prison, they probably got a lot of time that they're serving. In this particular case, not so much. This guy was actually serving less time than I was sent to prison for. He was serving a 5-year prison sentence. And with the fact that this took place back in 1995, I don't know if it was 95 or 1997, but it was around that time frame when old law would be phased out and new law would come into play. And what exactly old and new law pertains to is the amount of time that an individual is going to serve on their prison sentence. Meaning that back in 1995, when old law was still a thing, a person with a 5-year prison sentence was only going to end up serving something like 3 years and some change, versus what they would serve now under new law, which again, I think went into effect back in 1997, where on that same 5-year sentence, a prisoner is going to serve 4.5 years. So it's crazy for me to think that back in 1995, when this dude escaped, he was only serving a little more than 3 years. And when you hear how much time this dude actually got once they caught him for escaping, and also how long this guy stayed on the run and what he did during that time, I gotta be honest with you, I've never heard anything like this before. 1995, what in the heck kind of a word is that? Wuhan prison escapee gets a year in prison. Folks, if you think it's crazy as it is that this guy who escaped in 1995 would only end up getting 1 additional year to serve in prison for escaping, wait until you hear how long this guy was on the run for. I've never heard of this before. In most all cases, when somebody escapes from prison, they're usually apprehended and caught again pretty damn quickly. I don't usually hear about somebody staying on the lam for anything longer than 2 or 3 weeks at the very most. However, in this case, a 55-year-old man pleaded no contest Tuesday to breaking out of a Waupun prison 24 years ago. This man stayed on the run for 24 years. Folks, ask yourself this. If, for whatever crazy, unbelievable reason, you yourself escaped from prison and you were only serving a little bit more than 3 years, and you would end up staying out for 24 years, what exactly would you do? What would you do, and how would you go about trying to ensure that you were able to stay out for that long? What the hell would you do for damn near a quarter of a century? Robert Camacho was sentenced by a Dodge County Circuit judge to 1 year in prison to be served in addition to the remainder of his previous sentence. Camacho is currently serving time on the original 5-year sentence at Kettle Moraine Correctional Institution. He will be incarcerated until at least 2021 and will be on extended supervision until 2023. This story goes on to say that this guy was nabbed when his fingerprints were processed as a part of a security check while attending a military function recently. What the hell was this guy doing at a military function? Was that a part of his bucket list? 24 years I've been free. I done did everything on my bucket list except attend a military function. I swear, they got to be the dumbest people in the world. They couldn't find me for damn near a quarter century. Tell you what I'm gonna do. Tomorrow they got a military function taking place downtown. I'm attending that. I'm like a regular civilian out here now. They don't even think of me as an escapee anymore. I bet you they ain't even looking for me no more. And you know, I wonder if that's true. I wonder how long they actually looked for this guy and when, because I'm sure they did at some point. Had to give up. The fact that this man was only serving a little more than 3 years and decided to escape, that ain't make no sense. The fact that when he was finally apprehended after 24 years, he only ended up getting 1 additional year added onto his sentence. That damn sure ain't make no damn sense. And then the way that he was nabbed because he actually gave up his fingerprints at some sort of a military function. What the hell was he doing at the military function in the first place? Damn sure ain't make no sense neither. But as I continued to read the story, it began to make a little more sense to me, even though at the same damn time, it was still making zip nada, no type of sense at all. Folks, when you hear what this man did during these 24 years that he was on the lam, you ain't never gonna be ready for this. But it does definitely explain what he was doing at that military function. Now, this story goes on to say that the Dodge County District Attorney said during Camacho's initial appearance in court in December that Camacho only spent 5 weeks in prison on drug charges before he fled with his family to New York. They sentenced this man to 5 years. He only spent 5 weeks locked up before he had him a prison break. They should have cast that dude on the show, because he sure enough lived it for real. Camacho assumed his brother's name and enlisted in the Army. You know, the first thought that comes to my mind as I try to process and make sense of all of this is that Camacho and his brother, they had to have a sure enough bond. Boy, they had to be like best friends. If you're gonna let your brother escape from prison, then assume your identity and then enlist in the Army. Could you imagine if he would have got caught? Oh, they both was going down. That was a major risk for the brother to take. And then think about this. How the hell did this dude enlist in the Army? I know this took place back in 1995, but we ain't talking about Fred Flintstone type of time right here. You mean to tell me that they didn't check his fingerprints or nothing when he enlisted back then? I mean, I don't exactly know what the entire orientation process of joining the Army was or is now. I know I've seen that movie G.I. Jane a time or two. I know you go to boot camp, they're gonna shave your head, you ring the bell when you can't take it no more. But you know, I imagine that joining and trying to enlist in any branch of the military would entail, at least to some degree, possibly taking fingerprints to try to figure out and make sure you are exactly who you say you are. But maybe I'm wrong, because obviously this guy Camacho was damn sure able to enlist under his brother's name. Not only, this guy didn't just enlist in the Army, okay? This guy didn't just say, hey, I'm gonna go be all I can be for like 2 or 4 years. I'm gonna go fulfill that little obligation I think that you can sign up for. No. Folks, this man had a full-fledged 20+ year military career. Folks. This guy was in the military so long, it was just 2 years prior, 2 years ago, that he retired. Like, you can't even make this type of stuff up. So even though all of that makes absolutely zero sense right there, it does make a little more sense why this guy was attending this military function. And you know, I think to myself this. He assumed his brother's identity, he had a full-fledged military career, and retired. Well, now that the cat's out of the bag, I wonder, is the brother entitled to that retirement or that pension or whatever you get when you do retire, whatever kind of money that they give to you? I wonder if the brother's gonna get that or if all of that just goes away. Now, you know, there's one final thing that I want to throw into this particular story, and that is the fact that this guy only received an additional year. He is gonna have to serve the remainder of time. He only did 5 weeks on that initial 5-year sentence, which back then would only be a little more than 3 years. And now it's gonna be almost 5 years, then tack on that additional year for the escape. But it makes more sense to me now why he did only receive that additional year. I mean, while out there in the free world as an escaped fugitive, this man did become a productive member of society. And you know, think about this. Think about when this guy first initially went to court. As he was facing this drug charge trying to fight this, maybe he told the judge, hey judge, listen to me. If you give me just one more chance, I promise you I'm gonna get out there and I'm gonna do the right thing. I will do the right thing, judge, just give me one more chance. 5 years? You want to sentence me to 5 years? I just told you I would do the right thing. Camacho was damn sure not trying to hear none of that, and he proved to them people. I told y'all, if y'all would have gave me one more chance, I would have done the right thing. Instead, I stayed in prison for 5 weeks, I escaped, I joined the military, I served 20+ years in the military, retired 2 years ago. Told you I'd do the right thing. Y'all ain't want to believe me though. And again, it's just crazy to think that it was fingerprints that would ultimately lead to this guy getting caught. Folks, this next story is nowhere near as humorous. This is a lot more real. This story is just as crazy as the first story, but a complete polar opposite. Fingerprint match clears man after 36 years in prison following some really bad charges. Folks, I want to introduce you right here to Archie Williams. This is a man who first got arrested back in 1982, the year that I was born in. A man who first got arrested and was sentenced to life in prison for, again, some really bad charges. And back during the time when this crime was first committed, they definitely didn't have any type of DNA evidence. And what it would be that would ultimately lead to this guy Archie Williams getting arrested and then sentenced to life would be the victim who identified this guy after looking at his picture for the 4th time, saying that it was him. Archie Williams' family testified saying that this dude was asleep at his house when all of this took place. And the story also goes on to say that during the initial investigation of this crime, there were multiple sets of fingerprints that were left behind at the crime scene. And none of those fingerprints would end up matching those of Archie Williams. So they've got all of these fingerprints at this crime scene. None of them belong to this guy, but because the victim said that it was him, oh, trust and believe, that was all they needed back then to convict this dude. Archie Williams first gets arrested back in 1982. It would be in 1995, the same year where the guy from the first story escaped from prison, where he would write to this organization known as the Innocence Project, an organization aimed at trying to help people who were wrongly convicted. Back in 1995, when Archie Williams first wrote to this organization, he was 35 years old. It would be in 2019 and at the age of 58 years old, just a few days ago, where this guy finally was able to walk free after those convictions had finally been vacated, stating he wasn't the guy. And folks, the reason why these charges against Archie Williams were vacated was because it was just a couple of months ago when they finally decided to run all of those fingerprints that were left back at the crime scene through an FBI database for fingerprints, and lo and behold, they got a hit. The fingerprints lifted and taken from the scene led to the identification of another man, Stephen Forbes, who had confessed to multiple horrible charges after a 1986 arrest near the location of the crime for which Archie Williams was convicted. And this guy, Stephen Forbes, who had earlier admitted to doing all sorts of horrible things out there, whose prints were actually at the crime scene and was already locked up on these type of charges, where he was first arrested right around the corner from where this crime that Archie Williams served 36 years in prison took place at. This guy died in prison back in 1996. How crazy is that? You're serving time for a crime that you didn't commit. There's another guy who's locked up for similar charges. His fingerprints would end up being at the crime scene. And this other guy died like 14 years ago in prison. You know, the one thing that comes to my mind as I hear about this Archie Williams story is why the hell did it take so long for these fingerprints that were left at the crime scene to finally get run through this FBI database? But even with the fact that it did take so long, at least it was finally done. I mean, to me personally, it's too little too late with the fact that this guy almost served 4 decades in prison for something he didn't even do. And even crazier to add to all of this, as this guy got released from prison, he was speaking to the media, and one thing that he said was throughout all of the time that he served, he was locked up with quite a few other people, some people who had been locked up for 50+ years, who he truly felt like were innocent as well. Both of these two stories I share with you guys are absolutely crazy to think about, and again, it's fingerprints, not even DNA evidence, that led to one person getting locked up and another person getting set free. But with all of that, I really want to know what you guys think about both of these stories. Hey, look, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did so, please leave a like and a comment, letting me know exactly what you thought about this. As always, until next time, enjoy life, the free world. Never take a moment for granted, and make the most of every day. Peace!